It was just past midnight when the phone rang, slicing through the quiet like a blade. I sat up, heart hammering in my chest. Who would call at this hour? My hands trembled as I reached for it. "Hello," my voice cracked in the darkness. There was a pause, then a woman whispered, "You don't know me, but you deserve to know the truth. Your husband isn't who you think he is." Before I could ask anything, she hung up. I stared at the screen, the caller ID showing unknown. For a long moment I sat frozen, the words echoing in my mind. I glanced at Mark, sleeping soundly beside me, his face peaceful, almost innocent. I wanted to shake him awake, demand answers. But instead, I slipped out of bed, crept downstairs, and sat at the kitchen table, gripping my mug of cold coffee. Was it a prank, a cruel joke, or worse, the unraveling of a life I thought I understood? Something in her voice told me this wasn't just some twisted game. It was a warning. I had a choice: bury my head in the sand or dig for the truth, no matter how ugly it turned out to be. I chose to dig. The next morning, I watched Mark pour himself a cup of coffee, humming under his breath like nothing was wrong. I couldn't stop staring at him, searching for cracks in his perfect facade. Every move he made felt suspicious now. Every word he spoke seemed rehearsed. "You're quiet this morning," he said, flashing me that familiar, disarming smile. "Bad dreams?" I forced a laugh. "Yeah. Something like that." He kissed my forehead and left for work, same as he did every day. But the moment the door shut behind him, I grabbed my keys and followed. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for: maybe a second phone, a strange meeting, something that would prove the voice on the other end of that midnight call hadn't been lying. I trailed his car at a distance, heart pounding so loudly I could hear it over the hum of my engine. Mark didn't head straight to his office like he usually did. Instead, he turned off into a neighborhood I didn't recognize. I parked a block away and watched as he pulled into the driveway of a modest beige house. He sat there for a moment, looking nervous, before finally getting out of the car. A woman opened the front door before he even knocked. She smiled. He smiled back. Then he leaned in and kissed her, not a friendly peck, but the kind of kiss that tightened my throat and made my stomach turn. I slammed my hands against the steering wheel, gasping for breath. I wanted to storm out of the car, scream, tear their little house apart with my bare hands. But instead, I stayed frozen, blinking back tears, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. He stayed inside for almost 2 hours. When he finally came out, he looked relaxed, even whistling as he walked back to his car. I followed him again, numb, barely able to see through the tears clouding my vision. He drove straight to his office, like it was just another normal day. Like he hadn't just shattered my world into a million pieces. That night when he came home, he kissed me on the cheek and asked if I wanted to order Thai food like we usually did on Fridays. I nodded numbly, playing the role of the unsuspecting wife, while inside me something cold and sharp was taking root. The woman on the phone had been right. My life wasn't real. It was a performance, and I was the fool standing center stage, not even knowing the script was a lie. But not anymore. I wouldn't confront him yet. I needed more. I needed the whole truth. After that day, something inside me switched off. The woman who once trusted blindly was gone, replaced by someone colder, sharper. I learned how to smile on command, how to laugh at Mark's stories without letting the bitterness bleed through. He didn't suspect a thing. He even started bringing me small gifts again, flowers from the grocery store, my favorite coffee, like a man trying to atone for sins he hadn't yet been caught committing. But I wasn't the same, and I would never be again. I started with small things. I went through his laundry, looking for anything out of place: receipts, stray hairs, notes. I found a crumpled movie ticket stub in his pants pocket for a showing I knew we hadn't gone to together. I checked our bank account online, scanning for strange charges. There were lunches at cafes I'd never heard of, gas stations miles away from his office, occasional ATM withdrawals from unfamiliar places. The pieces didn't add up. I knew I needed more, real proof. So one evening, after Mark fell asleep in front of the TV, I slipped his phone from the couch cushion beside him. My hands shook as I scrolled through his messages. Most conversations seemed normal work chats, texts from friends, but there was one thread with no name attached, just a phone number. Unknown: "Miss you already. Can't wait to see you and little man again." Mark: "Me too. Tell him daddy loves him." The blood roared in my ears. My fingers slipped and I nearly dropped the phone. I quickly put it back before Mark stirred, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would give me away. I couldn't do this alone. I needed help. The next morning, I called my best friend Rachel. She'd always been my rock, the one person who could talk me down when my world felt like it was collapsing. "I don't even know who I am anymore," I whispered, tears spilling onto the steering wheel as I sat parked outside my office. "I feel like I'm losing my mind." Rachel didn't hesitate. "You're not crazy, you're waking up, and you're going to find the truth." With her encouragement, I bought a cheap GPS tracker and with trembling hands attached it under Mark's car. It felt dirty, wrong, like I was the one betraying him, but that voice from the midnight call echoed louder in my head. Over the next week, I monitored his movements obsessively. Most days, he followed his routine like clockwork: office, gym, home. But twice, he diverted, both times to that same modest beige house I'd seen before. One rainy afternoon, I called in sick and drove to the neighborhood. I parked a few houses down, slouching low in my seat. Hours passed. My fingers went numb from gripping the steering wheel too hard. I watched as Mark arrived, carrying a grocery bag. I watched as the same woman from before ran out to meet him, her face lighting up with a tenderness I'd forgotten could exist between two people. But it wasn't just her. A small boy darted out behind her, tiny legs pumping furiously, arms flailing in excitement. "Daddy!" he shrieked, launching himself at Mark. I froze. The word hung in the air, cruel and mocking. Mark scooped the boy up, spinning him around like a hero returning from war. Their laughter floated down the street, searing itself into my brain. I sat there, rain pelting my windshield, mouth open, heart crushed under the weight of what I had just witnessed. Tears blurred my vision until the house became nothing but a hazy smear. I stayed long after Mark went inside, staring at the empty street, feeling like I had been hollowed out. Later that night, when he crawled into bed beside me, smelling faintly of rain and lies, I stared up at the ceiling, wide awake. How long had he been living this double life? I didn't know. But one thing was certain: the man sleeping soundly beside me wasn't the man I married. And I would find out just how deep his betrayal went, even if it destroyed me. I couldn't take it anymore. That Sunday afternoon, while Mark napped on the couch, snoring softly with a half-empty beer bottle dangling from his hand, I sat across from him, heart pounding, fists clenched. This was it. No more pretending, no more waiting. "Mark," I said, voice sharper than I intended. He jerked awake, blinking at me in confusion. "What's wrong, babe?" I stood up, pacing the room. I couldn't even look at him. My hands shook, but I forced myself to stay steady. "Who is she?" I demanded. "And don't you dare lie to me." He froze. The blood drained from his face so fast it was almost comical. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. I laughed bitterly. "Really? Then explain the house, the woman, the little boy calling you daddy." His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "I followed you, Mark," I continued, voice rising. "I saw everything. So drop the act." For a long moment, he just sat there, head bowed. Then he rubbed his hands over his face and muttered, "It's complicated." I crossed my arms. "Try me." He finally met my eyes, and in that moment I hated him more than I had ever hated anyone in my life. "Her name's Emily," he said hoarsely. We had a thing. It was years ago. I didn't know she was pregnant until after it was too late." My stomach turned. "So you just decided to, what? Play house with them behind my back?" My voice cracked. "No," he shouted. "It's not like that. I send money. I see him sometimes. That's it." I stared at him, horrified. "That little boy loves you, Mark. He thinks you're his father." "Because I am," he shouted back, standing up so fast the coffee table rattled. What was I supposed to do? Ignore him? Pretend he doesn't exist? I flinched. "You were supposed to tell me," I cried. "You were supposed to be honest." He ran his hands through his hair, pacing now, wild-eyed. "I didn't want to lose you." "You already have," I whispered. The room was suffocating. Every happy memory we had built together, every holiday, every late-night talk, every whispered promise shattered into dust around me. I grabbed my purse, my keys, anything within reach. I needed air. I needed space. "Where are you going?" Mark called after me. "To remember who I was before you broke me," I said, slamming the door behind me. As I drove aimlessly through the streets, the weight of it all crushed me. Mark had a son, a life outside our marriage, and he had chosen to keep it hidden, to live a lie rather than trust me with the truth. But deep down, even as the betrayal burned in my chest, I knew this was only the surface. There were deeper lies still waiting to be unearthed, and I would find them no matter what it cost me. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a heart too heavy to carry. I had spent the night driving aimlessly, crying until I had nothing left inside me. But even after Mark's confession, something gnawed at me, an instinct that there was still more he hadn't said. I needed answers, real ones. I scrolled through my recent calls and found the number from that night, the woman who had started this unraveling. My hands trembled as I hit redial. It rang twice before she picked up. "You're ready to know everything, aren't you?" she said, as if she'd been expecting me. "I need to see you," I whispered. "Please." She gave me an address, a coffee shop about 30 minutes away. I didn't hesitate. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting in a corner booth. She looked tired, worn down in a way that felt all too familiar. Her eyes, though, were sharp. She pushed a cup of coffee toward me as I slid into the seat across from her. "My name's Claire," she said, "and I'm sorry you had to find out this way." I nodded, unable to form words. Claire took a deep breath. Mark and I, we were together for 8 years. I blinked. 8 years. Longer than Mark and I had been married. And we weren't just messing around, she continued bitterly. We were married, legally. My stomach lurched. What? She pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and slid it across the table. A photocopy of a marriage certificate, Mark's name, Claire's name, dated 5 years before he married me. You're lying, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Claire shook her head slowly. He never divorced me. I found out about you 2 years ago, about your wedding, about your perfect little suburban life. My hands shook so badly I almost knocked over the coffee cup. You're telling me he's still married to you, I croaked. Claire nodded grimly. And not just to me. He has 2 kids, a boy and a girl. They think he travels for work. They think he's a hero. I pressed my palms against my temples, willing myself to wake up. This couldn't be real. This was the kind of nightmare that happened to other people. Not me, he's been living a double life, Claire said, splitting his time between us, lying to everyone. Why didn't you come forward sooner? I whispered. I tried, she said, her voice breaking. I called you that night because I found out he bought a second house in your name. He's burying us all in lies. I leaned back in the booth, dizzy. The room spun. Mark wasn't just a cheater. He wasn't just a liar. He was a fraud, a criminal. And he had built our entire life on stolen time and broken promises. Somewhere deep inside me, anger flickered to life, burning hotter than any heartbreak. This wasn't just betrayal. It was war, and I was done being the victim. I drove home in a daze, Claire's words ringing in my ears, each one heavier than the last. Still married, 2 kids, a second house. My life, our life, was a lie stitched together with threads of betrayal, but I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed something tangible, something undeniable. I waited until Mark left for work the next morning. Then I tore through our house like a woman possessed. First, I checked his home office. Drawers, cabinets, every folder. I found nothing but old tax documents and work files. Neat, polished, sterile, too sterile. I turned my attention to the attic. Mark hated going up there. He claimed he was allergic to dust. I pulled down the ladder, heart hammering in my chest, and climbed up into the stale darkness. It didn't take long. In the far corner, buried under a pile of old Christmas decorations, was a battered metal lockbox. I hauled it into the light and pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside were papers, dozens of them, bank statements from accounts I didn't recognize, deeds to properties I'd never seen, credit cards under different names, a second cell phone, dead but still ominous in its silence. And at the very bottom, a photograph. Mark, Claire, 2 children, standing in front of a modest blue house, smiling like a damn Norman Rockwell painting. The date on the back was just 3 months ago. I sank to the floor, clutching the photo, bile rising in my throat. He hadn't just lied to me years ago. He was still lying, still weaving new webs of deceit, even as he kissed me goodnight and made plans for our future. I don't know how long I sat there, numb, cold, staring at that photo like it might somehow change if I looked hard enough. But eventually the rage pushed through the numbness. I grabbed the entire lockbox and dragged it downstairs. I spread everything out across the kitchen table, piece by damning piece. This was my life. A life built on fake smiles, forged signatures, stolen promises. The front door creaked. I turned. Mark stood there, briefcase in hand, frozen mid-step as he took in the scene. The papers, the photo, me standing there like a statue carved out of betrayal. His face went white, then red. I can explain, he started. I laughed. It was a hollow, ugly sound. Don't bother, I said, my voice colder than I ever thought possible. I know everything now. For the first time, I saw fear flash in his eyes. Real fear, not guilt, not shame, fear for himself. Good, because I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to make him wish he had never crossed me. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Mark thought I'd crumble. He thought I'd scream, cry, pack my bags, and beg for answers. Instead, I smiled. Not the kind of smile he was used to, but the kind that hides a blade behind it. I just need time, I told him that night, to process everything. He bought it, because of course he did. I'd played the good wife for so long, it was easy to fall back into character. But inside me, a storm was brewing. I spent the next few days playing it cool, cooking dinner, asking him about work, kissing his cheek before bed. Meanwhile, every hour he wasn't home, I was building a case. I called Claire. Are you ready to burn it all down? I asked. Her silence was answer enough. We met again, this time with a lawyer present. Claire had already filed for separation, but we agreed to time everything perfectly. Her attorney would draft a joint legal strategy. I began gathering evidence, photos of the documents I'd found, screenshots of text messages, bank transfers, even social media posts he didn't think to hide. I bought a new phone, one he didn't know about. I used it to record every conversation, every slip of the tongue, every denial. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about control. I created a private email account and forwarded everything there just in case. Claire and I started talking daily, our alliance growing stronger with each shared secret. For two women who were never supposed to meet, we were suddenly bound by the same wound, and we both knew exactly where to cut to make him bleed. A week later, I visited the blue house on my own. Claire opened the door, surprised. "He's not here," she said. "I know," I replied. "I came to meet your kids." She blinked. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "They deserve to know the truth, maybe not now, but someday. And I need to see what kind of father he pretends to be." Inside, the walls were lined with framed drawings, crayon hearts labeled Daddy, and a calendar marked with visitation days. I looked around, absorbing the life Mark had kept hidden from me, a life built on illusion, and now it would all collapse. Back home, I waited for him to leave for his conference. He kissed me goodbye, suitcase in hand, and told me he'd call before bed. I smiled and said, "I love you." Then I locked the door, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat down at my laptop. Everything was in place. Emails scheduled, calls lined up, legal documents ready. All that was left was the performance, and I planned to make it unforgettable. Mark's birthday was coming up. I told him I wanted to throw a small party, just close friends, a few neighbors, some work people. He smiled like a fool. "That sounds great, babe, you're the best." He had no idea. I rented a space at a nice Italian restaurant downtown. Private room, candles, soft jazz in the background. I sent out invitations, not the usual ones. These were curated. I invited Claire and her two kids. I invited Mark's coworkers, his boss, our couple friends, even his mother, every single person he had ever lied to, every witness he didn't know he had. I arrived early. Everything was in place. A laptop connected to the projector. A carefully written speech tucked into my purse. The USB drive felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my coat pocket. At 7:00 p.m., the guests began arriving. Claire showed up exactly on time, holding her son's hand. Her eyes met mine. No words, just a nod. At 7:15, Mark walked in, dressed in a tailored navy suit, grinning like a man who thought he still owned the room. He froze when he saw Claire, and then he saw the kids. I stepped forward, gently took his hand, and kissed him on the cheek. "Happy birthday, honey," I said sweetly. "We have a surprise for you." He looked around the room, confused, nervous. Too late. I clinked my glass. "Everyone, may I have your attention?" The room fell quiet. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight, not just to celebrate Mark's birthday, but to honor the truth." I clicked the remote. The projector came to life. Images filled the screen, bank statements, photos, messages. The marriage certificate, pictures of Mark with Claire, with the kids kissing, holding hands, lying. Gasps erupted. Someone dropped a glass. Mark took a step toward me. "What the hell are you doing?" I held up a hand. "Don't." Then I turned to Claire. "Would you like to say a few words?" She stepped forward, voice steady. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here because I believed I was his only wife. Turns out I wasn't even the first." A murmur swept through the crowd. The kids stood silently beside her, eyes wide, watching their father unravel. Mark's face crumpled. "I can explain." "No," I said, voice like ice. "You can't." He looked around, panicked. "Please don't do this." I leaned in. "You already did this. I'm just turning on the lights." The room sat in stunned silence. For a moment, all you could hear was the soft hum of the jazz music still playing in the background. Then Mark sat down, head in his hands, as everything around him collapsed. I stood tall. Not broken, not angry, just done. The party ended in silence. No hugs, no cake, no polite goodbyes, just a quiet exodus of stunned faces, side glances, and murmured disbelief. Mark sat alone, staring into nothing, while I gathered my things like it was any other evening. He didn't follow me home, but he came the next morning. I heard his car in the driveway before I even opened my eyes, then the frantic knocks, the ringing doorbell. His voice calling my name over and over like a child left out in the cold. I didn't answer. I watched from behind the curtain as he stood there in the same suit from last night, wrinkled, defeated. Eventually, I opened the door. He looked at me with bloodshot eyes. "Please," he whispered. "Let me explain. We can fix this." "Fix what?" I said quietly. "Your second marriage, your other children, the lies, the fact that you never even planned to stop." He reached for me. I stepped back. "Just give me a chance," he pleaded. "I'll leave Claire. I'll walk away from all of it." I laughed. It was sharp and painful. "You think this is about picking between us, like we're some sick competition?" He said nothing. "You burned the house down, Mark, and now you're standing in the ashes asking me to pretend it's still home." His shoulders sagged. A few days later, I received a message from Claire. "It's done. Filed the papers this morning. You were right. He would have kept lying to us both forever." She attached a photo of the divorce petition. I stared at it longer than I expected, not out of joy, but out of grief. Not just for me, but for her, for the kids, for everything we had both believed in. Mark's spiral was quick. He was fired 2 weeks after the party. Turns out his business trips had affected more than just his marriage. His performance at work had been slipping, and HR had received anonymous complaints with receipts attached. Oops. Mother, once my biggest critic, called me sobbing. He lied to me too, she said. I thought he was a good man. I didn't correct her. I just let her cry. In the weeks that followed, Mark tried everything: emails, letters, voicemail after voicemail. He sent flowers, gifts, even showed up outside my work once, holding a sign that said, "I'm sorry." Pathetic. It wasn't anger that kept me from answering. It was clarity. He wasn't sorry. He was scared of being alone, of losing control, but me. I wasn't scared anymore. Not of him, not of the truth, not of starting over, because finally, for the first time in years, I was free. Healing didn't happen overnight. It never does. At first, the silence in the house was unbearable. The absence of Mark's voice, his keys jingling on the counter, the faint smell of his cologne in the closet, it haunted me. But over time, that silence became comforting. It was mine. I started taking walks again. Real walks, not just pacing the neighborhood out of restlessness, but slow, thoughtful steps with no destination. I watched the leaves change. I sat on park benches and listened to strangers laugh. I felt the world move on, and somehow I moved with it. I redecorated the bedroom, took down the wedding photos, painted the walls a soft sage green. I bought new sheets, fresh linens. I lit candles for no reason at all except that I could. One morning, I signed up for a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. The first time I touched the clay, I cried, not because it was hard or because it reminded me of anything, but because it was mine, my hands, my mess, my creation. I began writing in a journal again, not about him, about me, my dreams, my regrets, my plans. I even reached out to Claire once more. We met for coffee, no lawyers, no agendas, just two women who had survived the same fire. We talked about the kids, about healing, about moving forward, and then we smiled at each other with something close to peace. People often ask me if I forgave Mark. I didn't, not fully. Maybe I never will, but I forgave myself for not seeing it sooner, for loving too blindly, for staying too long, for believing in a man who never existed. That was the hardest part. And now, I work with a local nonprofit that supports women navigating divorce and emotional abuse. I share my story not because it's special, but because it's not. Because too many women think they're alone when they're not. Because silence is where shame lives. And I've learned that there's a strange kind of power in surviving, not in being strong all the time, but in falling and still choosing to get up. I sleep better now. I laugh louder. I've made peace with the parts of my story that hurt the most. They don't define me. They built me. And someday, maybe love will come again. But if it doesn't, I'll still be whole. Because I am not what he did to me. I am what I chose to become after. It all began with a phone call I almost didn't answer. That one whisper in the dark shattered everything I thought I knew, but maybe that was exactly what I needed. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. At first, it wrecks you, but only by walking through the wreckage can you ever build something real. I lost the man I thought I loved. I lost the life I thought I had. But I gained something more valuable, the clarity to see things as they are, and the strength to walk away from what never truly loved me back. There were days I thought I wouldn't survive it, nights when the silence felt louder than any scream. But healing isn't about erasing the pain, it's about learning to carry it differently. Softer, braver, wiser. I've let go of the need for closure. Some people will never say sorry. Some wounds won't be understood by anyone but you, and that's okay. Because this story isn't about him anymore. It's about me, and the woman I became because of, and in spite of everything he tried to break, and that's the ending I choose.